What if everything you see, every star, every memory, is encoded somewhere else? In the 1970s, black holes revealed a terrifying possibility. The universe may store information not in its depths, but on its edge. Are we living inside a cosmic projection? Or is reality itself an emergent illusion, stitched together from quantum relationships we cannot see? Tonight we explore the holographic universe and the boundary of existence. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Common Anomaly Podcast. You're listening to Season 3, Episode 4. I'm your host, Stuart James. Joining me today is Clayton James. How's it going, brother?
I'm doing good. Cold.
Yeah, winter has returned to Calgary. Yeah, we've had the nicest weather all through February, and then the last couple days, huge cold snap, and it's like minus 30. It's absolutely awful. Big dump of snow.
Yeah.
So that's fun.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm excited about this episode today. You know, we're coming off our episode last week on remote viewing and psi phenomenon. And we initially had something else planned for this week, but listening back over the episode after we were done, I was like, why don't we jump into this holographic universe stuff? I believe you mentioned it. We had said that's worth an episode. And I was like, let's keep digging into this. I want to keep pulling on this thread and see if we can maybe find the source of this mysterious phenomenon of psi phenomenon. Maybe this is the answer. So I feel like that's what we're going to do today, is try and dig this up and kind of connect those dots.
Yeah. So on our last episode, I was talking about this fellow, again, I will butcher the name, Itzhak Bentov. And
Yep.
As I was reading that Gateway document, it just seemed like a lot of the Monroe Institute's work and a lot of the work the CIA ended up doing on remote viewing was based on this Bentov's work. And a lot of it is premised on the idea that the universe is actually holographic, that matter and space is kind of a secondary thing. Primarily the universe is this field made of information, basically. And a lot of that was, he didn't come up with this idea, but he helped to popularize it, and a lot of his work was based on this. So this whole idea originally arose from kind of a crisis in physics, because quantum physics...
Uh-oh. Are we going to be using the quantum word a lot today?
I mean, I will. You don't have to. I just...
No, you're right. It's very relevant. It's
Yeah.
very relevant to the topic. There's part of me that cringes a little bit every time I hear the word quantum. But we're going to use it judiciously and appropriately.
Yeah, I will try not to get into too much
I don't
really sciencey stuff.
I don't want to get lost in physics jargon. I feel like that'll lose people right away.
Yeah, we want to just get into a little bit of how this idea came about.
The good stuff, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that came out of quantum physics was this idea that information cannot be destroyed.
Yes, okay.
Information is always there. If you could measure every particle in the universe, where it is and its trajectory and what it's doing, you could basically wind everything back and see any moment in time or any place, and you could wind it forward, knowing the cause and effect of everything, and see into the future.
Yeah.
The information is always there.
Yeah, because if I understand correctly, like we have the arrow of time, which we all feel and understand is the forward momentum of time. But there's nothing in physics that says time could not go the other way. So if you take Encyclopedia Britannica and throw it into the sun, it's destroyed, but the information isn't destroyed. You should be able to rewind the universe, the flow of time. There's no reason it can't physically go the other way. Yeah. And you regain your intact encyclopedia from the sun.
Yeah. So this became a point of contention, though, this idea that information cannot be destroyed, because that very much clashes with relativistic physics. This is one of the reasons why, everyone talks about they're trying to find a unified field theory of physics, because quantum physics and the theory of relativity, they do not agree on things. They contradict each other on certain topics. And this is one of them because Stephen Hawking came along and he said, no. Information can be destroyed. There's one thing that can destroy information.
Black hole.
And that's a black hole. Oh. So later on, what this other physicist found, well, there's a few of them. Jacob Bekenstein, Gerald Hooft, Leonard Susskind. I'm probably mispronouncing all of those names. But anyway, what Jacob Bekenstein argued is that black holes, they must have entropy. And what do I mean by entropy? I stayed up all night trying to figure out how to explain this, because this is important.
And I'm so glad you did, because honestly, so much of this physics stuff I find really hard to wrap my head around. Even I was playing around with Chatbot, trying to get Chatbot to simplify it for me. Mm-hmm. And it's like Chatbot was talking itself in circles and couldn't quite clarify it for me. So it's all on you now.
Entropy. What do I mean by entropy, specifically as it's related to black holes? Well, I mean, if you've heard the word entropy, you probably hear it in the context. It's kind of a measure of order versus chaos. You know, the tendency of any system to move from a state of order to disorder. We hear about the heat death of the universe, or the entropy death of the universe, when in the far future the universe becomes uniform and cold. Yeah. The entropy death of the universe. What I mean here by entropy is how many, and this is the actual definition of entropy, is how many microscopic configurations are possible to produce the same macroscopic object. If you're looking at an object like a star or a planet or a black hole, how many different ways could all the atoms that make that up be arranged? That is its total entropy.
Yeah. You'd think that would be nearly infinite, wouldn't it?
Well, it's finite. It's very large, but it's finite. So basically, it's a measure of information, you know, if you wanted to think of it that way. How many different arrangements are there? But it's a measure of hidden information because it's producing the same object.
Right.
So he says black holes have entropy. Therefore, they must contain information. Now, they can measure entropy with objects in space. And what they use to measure entropy is by looking at an object's temperature. Now, it's not as clear-cut as, you know, a certain temperature is related to a certain level of entropy. Like high temperature is a certain degree of entropy. It doesn't work like that. Basically,
Come on, I believe in you.
we measure entropy by fluctuations in temperature.
Okay, all right.
For example, you know, if something heats up quickly, it has low entropy.
Okay.
If you apply some energy to an object and it heats up quickly, it has low entropy. If you apply energy to something and it heats up very slowly or not at all, it has high entropy.
So something that's, say, super non-conductive, that would have low entropy.
Yeah, I was actually getting to this exact analogy. I was trying to wrap my head around this, and I came up with the analogy of a stovetop. You know, the element on a stove, it's usually made of cast iron or carbon steel. These are objects with low entropy. Why they have low entropy is they have a very kind of rigid lattice-like structure to the atoms that make them up. There's less ways you can arrange that matter to produce the same object. It has low entropy. As a consequence, when we apply heat to it, it heats up very quickly. That's why we use those materials to make stovetop burners. Yeah. So they can measure an object's entropy by the fluctuations in its temperature as energy is applied to it.
All right. But what does entropy ultimately have to do with the holographic universe?
Oh, and I'm so glad you asked this, because I was just getting to this.
Okay, perfect.
So what this physicist, Jacob Bekenstein, found was very interesting and very counterintuitive, because you would think a black hole's entropy would scale with its volume. The larger the black hole, the higher the entropy would be.
Okay.
This is not what he found. What he found was the entropy of a black hole does not scale with its volume. It scales with its surface area. Like, think of a balloon. If you blow up a balloon, the volume inside the balloon does not scale at the same rate as its surface area. You know, you would have to basically cube the volume of the balloon before you squared the surface area. So what he found was entropy scales with surface area, not volume. And this kind of led to the implication that all of the information within a black hole has more to do with its surface area. It's as if all the information, all the possible arrangements of matter within that black hole is somehow encoded on the surface of its event horizon.
Right. Okay, this is getting a little dense. This is getting a little, or maybe I'm a little dense. But, okay, so let's try and break this down. So I throw the Bible into a black hole. Our intuitive brain tells us that it gets sucked into oblivion and it's destroyed. But you're saying all the information contained within that Bible actually still is retained on the surface area of the event horizon of the black hole.
Yeah, in a sense.
In theory, we should be able to retrieve it back.
Yes, in theory.
Right. Does it also exist as an object again on the other side of the black hole, on the interior? Because I know when black holes, as they absorb matter, they grow in volume.
Yeah.
So they are taking on mass. Or are they taking on mass when they grow in size?
Yeah, but the total entropy, which we can measure through fluctuations in its temperature, does not scale with volume. It scales with surface area.
Okay, so what you're saying is the information is the important part.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the total amount of information within that black hole is encoded on the surface.
Right.
So these other physicists, Gerald Hooft and Leonard Susskind, come along, and they propose that the universe works the same way, in that all of the information that makes up the universe could somehow be encoded on a boundary around it. All the information is encoded on the surface, on a two-dimensional surface, and space and time and the 3D universe we live in is actually a projection.
Okay, and so this is how we get to the holographic universe. Okay, so this is where it gets tricky, because I was reading about this, and that assertion is not to say that our 3D existence, or our 3D plus 1, spatial dimensions plus time.
Yeah.
That's not to imply that that's fake.
No,
but
it doesn't.
It's an expression of a core reality that is fundamentally two-dimensional.
It doesn't make anything less real. It just means the universe, on a fundamental level, operates much differently than we initially thought. Mm-hmm. And what gained this theory so much traction is it was basically one of the only ways you could get quantum physics and relativity to agree with each other.
Right. So it could be a clue to our unified field problem, right? Because it's getting these two different systems that don't always jive to work together.
Yeah, and it explains some weird stuff in quantum physics, like entanglement. Mm-hmm. You know, entanglement is something that...
Spooky action at a distance.
Yeah, Einstein hated. Einstein hated it because it poked so many holes in how we thought the universe worked, because light is supposed to be the fastest thing. You can't go faster than light. But what he found is if two particles are entangled, they could be separated by light years.
Yeah.
And whatever you do to one particle happens to the other particle, no matter what the distance. Some sort of information must be being transmitted between these two particles, but faster than the speed of light.
Well, is it a transference of information, or is it like a connection that is not information being communicated from one to the other? But entanglement implies that they're actually on some level the same object.
Yeah, but if you think of the universe as being a hologram, both these particles could be just two different projections of the same thing. Yeah. That's why whatever happens to one happens to the other one. Yeah. It explains entanglement.
Because then you don't need information to traverse any medium in that world, right? Or under that model.
No, you don't.
Yeah. That's interesting. I was reading this book a bit today, and it sucks. It's called... No,
you're really selling me on it.
No, I'm sorry. I'm mincing my words. The book doesn't suck. I was saying I was trying to say it's unfortunate that I just got it last night, because I've only been able to read about a chapter or two. It's called The Holographic Universe, and it's by Michael Talbot. And there was an interesting section near the beginning where he's talking about holographic theory of the brain, and he really got into the problem of memory, because for the longest time we really didn't understand how we created memories and how we stored memories and how we accessed memories. Mm-hmm. It was theorized for the longest time that memories must be contained in some form of cluster of cells or neurons or whatever, in these things called engrams. But we hadn't really found them. We didn't know how to describe them or how to access them. We didn't know how the brain was organizing this information. Mm-hmm. But long story short, I'll cut through all the various studies through history and animal models and stuff, but what they found was that memory had to be distributed in the same way that holograms can be created. Because if you have a holographic plate with an image that you're using to create a hologram, you can break off a chunk off the side of it and still create the full image from the broken chunk.
Yeah, it encodes information non-locally.
Yeah.
Like if you take a broken piece of a holographic plate, you'll still get the same image. It just won't be as higher resolution. It won't have the same depth of field.
Yeah.
It'll be a lower quality version of the image, but the full image will still be there.
Yeah, you can still recreate the whole from a piece of the holographic plate or the image plate. And what they're saying is perhaps the brain works the same way, where no matter how much you can remove 98% of your brain matter, but with the remaining 2%, you can still retrieve memories as if you had the whole.
Yeah, and
it functions on the same principle.
We've talked about stories like that on the show before, like that guy in France that woke up with a headache and he went to the doctor and he got a brain scan. He's missing 90% of his brain.
Yeah. So it turns out his brain was actually mostly empty, just full of fluid, right? But yet he was still able to live a relatively normal life. He wasn't the most intelligent person, but he was able to get by. All that to point out, that's the theory. That's what they call the holographic theory of the brain, is that it functions on that same principle, where you can still retrieve the whole of a memory even with a portion of the actual gray matter.
Yeah. Well, how does this lead us back to remote viewing?
This I found tricky, especially trying to negotiate this with Chatbot. On the surface, these theory of a holographic universe seems to imply to me that seems to imply a substrate of the universe where all things are connected. Yeah. All information should be accessible in some way on this lower, more basic plane that we all fundamentally exist on, and that everything does. And maybe that explains psi phenomenon. Maybe that explains the ability to remote view, because your mind, your body isn't actually separate in space and time, because space and time are sort of illusory.
Yeah, if space-time is just a projection of information that's been encoded on some sort of surface layer, some sort of interior surface layer, one of the possible implications of that, certainly one that this fellow Itzhak Bentov believed in, is that past, present, future exist all at once in a superposition.
Yeah.
You know, it all exists at the same instant as a static object.
Yeah.
And our linear progression through it is basically an illusion.
Which that brings up certain philosophical questions, like, are you actually responsible for anything you do? Because if the future already exists, you have no deterministic power, right?
Right.
Because the future already exists, it will be what it's going to be.
It's already written, and this is one of the points in my research for this that I felt a lot of existential dread, because the consequence of that would be, what about your subjective experience of being alive?
Yeah.
What happens to that when you die? Well, your subjective experience is still there. There's nothing for you to do, but you die and you go right back to the beginning and you live your whole life over again in exactly the same way.
What do you think would be the point of that, though? Especially if you have no ability to change or influence any kind of change or do things differently, of just being on this perpetual loop of the same existence. And why experience it in that format at all if that's not the true nature of it?
Well, what is experience really? Is experience something that was designed for us to have, or is it just something that emerged from patterns of data feeding back on themselves?
Like a memory. Like a memory being relived.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's kind of like
So maybe all our lives and all our existence is actually just the universe having a recollection.
Yeah, it's kind of like in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Do you remember the first episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine?
I most certainly do.
Yeah, Cisco, he discovers the wormhole. And what is a wormhole? It's a passage from point A to point B in the universe, but that within that passage you are outside of the universe. So he's flying his shuttlecraft through the wormhole, and he encounters these entities who call themselves the prophets.
Yeah.
Now these prophets exist outside of the universe, outside of space-time. Mm-hmm. And they begin kind of interrogating him on what is he. They don't understand what he is, and they keep probing his mind, and they keep showing him images and places and different times throughout his life. They keep taking him back there and questioning him about it. And they show him the moment that his wife was killed years ago. And he's saying, I don't like being here. I don't want to be shown this. And they say, then why do you exist here?
Yeah, because for him, it's in the past. For them, they're outside of time. They have no concept of past and future.
Yeah, it's all just there as a static object. They're saying, why do you exist here then?
Yeah.
And they have this great back and forth where Cisco is trying to explain the nature of linear time to these creatures who just don't understand it at all. That's what it would be like if you were outside of this hologram and looking in.
Yeah.
You would see all of everything happening at once.
And I think this is why it's so hard for us to wrap our brains around this advanced, complicated physics stuff, because it's so alien to how we experience our lives. Mm-hmm. It's really hard for us to try and comprehend that we exist in some kind of, as just information on some two-dimensional event horizon. I've often heard, is that why they say there's this new theory that we could actually be living inside of a black hole? Yeah. Right? Or is it just that our actual reality is more the information that lives on the surface of the event horizon as a film? Maybe our entire universe has already been sucked inside a black hole and destroyed. That's the loop. We're just reliving the previous existence of this universe over and over again. I want to dive into simulation theory a little bit. They feel connected, even though I know they're different. Holographic universe theory is different from simulation theory. But it seems to me that there's some connective tissue there. Mm-hmm. Because simulation theory is the idea that we don't live in the first version of reality, that civilization...
Base reality.
Yeah, civilizations rise and they inevitably create really high definition, high information volume recreations. Within those recreations are populated with artificial entities that create their own simulations and then create their own, and you go down this infinite rabbit hole of simulations. Mm-hmm. And if that's true, then the likelihood of being in the number one spot at the beginning of the line is very unlikely. Yeah. Do you think if the holographic universe theory is true and accurate mathematically as a way of describing our universe, does that imply that it's more likely that we're in a simulation? Or could that just be the way the natural world is?
I don't know.
You're supposed to be the guy with the answers, Clayton. That's why I bring you here. I ask dumb questions and you give smart answers. Did I just completely go down a tangent you just did not expect at all?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, well, let's go back to Star Trek. Let's talk about...
Well, anyway, yeah, Star Trek. I miss the days when Star Trek was good. But anyway, remote viewing. What does this have to do with remote viewing? Well, according to it's Bentoff and the Monroe Institute and the CIA, remote viewing, in theory, works because when you are focusing your mind in this way, you're actually accessing the absolute. What is the absolute? It's that boundary layer where all the information is encoded and encoded non-locally. In every piece of that boundary layer is the whole. If you can access that, you can access anywhere in space and time and see it in your mind. That's why remote viewing works. Yeah. According to the CIA.
Well, and you definitely hear that in the language when you hear people in that world, even the more way out woo ones, when they talk about like the Akashic record, are getting sudden downloads of information when they're meditating or whatever. Maybe they really are just accessing that plane where all the information lives. And you really do have access to any and all things throughout all time and space.
Yeah.
And that's how that would work.
Yeah. And like the other thing I found just fascinating about this is it kind of mirrors some ancient cosmologies.
Okay.
This holographic concept, specifically Buddhist cosmology. Buddhist cosmology has this concept called Indra's web, in which they see the entire universe as this giant web with jewels embedded in it. And each one of these jewels reflects every other one of the jewels infinitely. And any change to one of them will change the rest of them. And that's how they saw the universe.
Interesting.
And some Buddhists, way back, actually had their own way of accessing the absolute, because they also saw life as an endless cycle of death and rebirth, reincarnation. Maybe not in the same way that we just discussed, but, a cycle of death and rebirth.
Yeah.
How do you transcend that? How do you access the absolute? There was this sect of monks that belonged to this esoteric form of Buddhism called Shujendo, and they were in northern Japan in the 7th century. And they had their own process for accessing the absolute. I'm going to try and pronounce this right. It's called Sokushin Butsu. It probably sounds better with a Japanese accent.
Can you do a little better than that?
Sokushin Butsu!
Thank you. We were talking about that in the car, and you made a little bit of an accent like that in the car when you said it, and I was like, I really want you to lean into that when we record.
I apologize to our Japanese listeners.
Oh, they love us.
I truly do.
And we love them. Hello, Japan.
Anyway. What Sokushin Butsu means, it means to become the Buddha. So this process took 3,000 days. So approximately 8 years and change.
Yeah.
You had to be really of sound mind and clean spirit and all that stuff to undergo this process. It was considered a great honor.
Yeah.
Basically what they do is, for these 3,000 days, they would eat nothing but pine needles and seeds, basically to remove all of their body fat.
Right.
And they would drink very little water. They were trying to dehydrate themselves. They would drink tea that was laced with a toxin, basically slowly poisoning themselves over these years to discourage bacterial growth.
Yeah.
Towards the end of this process, they would seal themselves away and they would enter a meditative pose. They would recite the Nenbutsu, or the many names of Buddha, and they would do this over the course of days. And they'd be drip-fed water, just like drops at a time, literally, during this. And each day they would ring a bell to indicate they were still alive. And this meditation lasted for days. And basically what they were doing, once the bell stopped, it would indicate the person was dead.
Yeah.
And they would unseal them. And basically what had happened is this person had mummified themselves alive.
Yeah.
And
horrific process.
What they unsealed was perfectly preserved mummy in this meditative pose with this serene expression on their face.
Like human jerky.
Yeah, basically what they were trying to do is enter this meditation that would last for all of eternity.
Okay, so that they wouldn't reincarnate.
Yeah, they're basically they're called living mummies or living Buddhas. They're mummified bodies, but according to this practice, they are still in this meditation for all eternity. So, that is how they transcend space and time and life and death and become eternal. That is their contact with the absolute.
Okay, I think I understand this, if I'm conceptualizing this right. So the fact that they've so perfectly preserved their physical entity and have entered such a high state of meditation that they can still basically, their spirit can still basically occupy that dead vessel for eternity, because it's preserved for eternity, preserving their soul's vessel so long as they stay in this state.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming as long as the mummy is preserved.
Mm-hmm.
So does that imply that ultimately, say relatives or Buddhist priests or whatever died out for whatever reason, the mummies were no longer cared for and ended up being damaged and destroyed? Would that break their cycle, and would they still be sent back to the beginning? Or is it,
I don't know.
Or is it more the spiritual aspect where
I've never tried it.
Well, maybe you should. That's what this show is all about.
It sounds really horrible.
It sounds really awful, yeah. And it definitely would test your devotion, right? You would have to be really devoted. Do we have pictures of these? I know we're not showing pictures, but maybe we could put some pictures in the show notes.
Yeah, I've got some pictures we can put in the show notes.
Okay. The thing you were mentioning at the beginning in terms of the cosmology and the jewels and the light connecting the jewels, I didn't quite catch everything you said, but it struck me as interesting because in the Holographic Universe book I was reading, I didn't quite get everywhere it was going, but they talked a lot about lasers. Mm-hmm. And how lasers are very effective at making holograms because it's a very coherent beam of photons. It talked about interference patterns, right?
Yeah.
Which is fundamental to how you create a hologram. Is you have two waveforms that interact and create an interference pattern. And it's those dips and rises that you can use to create the different aspects of an image when they're combined. Mm-hmm. Shine a light on it. I'm garbling this up the wazoo. But anyway, interference patterns are important, and they're pointing out that lasers are basically the perfect pebble to throw in your pond to create the wave, right? Which is why lasers are so effective.
Yeah, they actually did an experiment in 2010 to test this theory. It involved lasers.
Okay.
It was called the holometer.
Okay.
And this was put together by Fermilab, and what they were trying to do is they were trying to use these two laser beams to see if the universe had a resolution limit. Basically, if they could create some sort of holographic noise within the universe itself, enough to be able to detect.
Okay.
How exactly this experiment worked is a little over my head. This is one of those points where I have to hand wave and say, science-y stuff happened.
Yeah.
But that was the point. They were basically trying to see if the universe, if reality itself had a resolution limit. Or if they could detect any holographic noise, basically. Yeah. They did not detect that. That's not necessarily a disproof. Just they did not have the ability
to physically reach the limit.
Yeah.
It could have been a limitation of the experiment itself to actually detect that limit.
Yeah, actually, this has led to, because the experiment lasted, the experiment was ongoing for about 2 years, was very abruptly shut down. And yeah, there's actually a lot of conspiracy theories surrounding this experiment that they did actually find something. And
that's why they had to shut it down.
And it's been kind of hushed up.
Interesting. What do you think? Are we in a simulation? Living on the surface of a black hole? Does it matter?
Well, this whole thing came about basically from an argument between quantum physicists and the more relativistic physicists on, does the past exist?
Right.
Does the past exist? Because if information is destroyed, you can say the past does not exist. It's over and done. It's gone.
Yeah.
Except in being able to summon some distorted piece of it through memory. The past does not exist. But holographic theory and the quantum physicists said, no, the past does exist. You know, I'm much more comforted by the idea that the past does exist. But
and I mean, this book also touched on eidetic memory, which is like a photographic memory. There's some people out there that seem to have this just born ability to remember every moment of their lives in perfect detail, which sounds horrifying to me.
Yeah.
But what if, and it was just supposing that they basically just have a better innate search parameter for finding that information. And all our brains are actually capable in this and retain all the information. Our brains are actually have a phenomenal storage volume for data.
Mm-hmm.
And that every moment of our existence, we can theoretically recall in perfect clarity. It's just the method of access. And some people are just born with this ability, but maybe you can actually train your brain better to access memories better. Because it was given a couple case files and people describing about how they access memories, and it's like they're living through it again. It's not like when you and I have a memory, you kind of picture it in your mind. It's been very hazy. You remember some details and not others, but you're not really having the experience that you're there in that room again, or having those events really happen to you again. It's detached, it's distant from you. Whereas these people that live with eidetic memories, when they recall something, when they go back and think back on something, it's like they're back in that moment.
Yeah.
Physically, and it's happening to them all over again.
So are those people, accessing the absolute or the boundary layer or whatever you want to call it?
Or just their personal absolute, if it's specifically connected to their own experiences. Maybe those people would make really good remote viewers if they could apply the techniques of remote viewing to access information beyond. Maybe they would get incredible clarity and ease of access. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Interesting. Okay, what else you got?
Well, I kind of had a final thought.
Okay, yeah, we can go to final thoughts. We're doing pretty good for time. We're a little short, but we're also struggling with crazy technical difficulties of getting this episode put together properly today. One of which was my computer crashing because I ran out of disk space, which could happen again at any moment. So yeah, if we're ready to wrap up and got final thoughts, let's do it.
I actually came prepared with a final thought today.
Awesome.
So, on the more personal side, as I was reading through this, especially the implications that the past, present, and future all coexisting, and your whole life is already written and you're just going to relive it again and again and again. I was feeling a lot of existential terror at that idea. I don't like that idea. I really don't. But you know what it made me want to do? I was talking to my girlfriend later that night, and I said, wow, I'm feeling really, really down tonight. And I was kind of telling her about all of this, and I said, you know what it makes me want to do? I just feel like I really have to say how thankful I am for the happy memories we've had. I hope we can have a lot more of them.
That sounds very sweet.
And,
did she spoon?
I hope so. Anyway, my point is, if you are just a beam of light shining through some holographic projection, shine on.
Oh, that's a very nice final thought. I don't know if I have a final thought. I sort of went through the same thing. I did, as I was going through this stuff. It didn't get me down, I don't think. It didn't fill me with dread, but it did make me think, like, what is the ultimate purpose around this? Or can I possibly conceive this? Is this just beyond human understanding? Because it doesn't quite compute. We want our lives, our existence to make sense and to have a purpose and be real.
Mm-hmm.
And this feels like it kind of questions all that. But at the end of the day, I always end up asking myself, well, what does it matter? Does this knowledge impact how I'm going to live my life in any significant way? Does it change anything about what I'm going to do tomorrow, what I'm going to say, how I'm going to feel about, like you say, making happy memories with family and loved ones? No, I don't think so. So what does it matter, right?
Yeah, like we said, it doesn't make anything less real.
Yeah, so I don't know. If anything, it's just a great way to bake your noodle, I guess. That might be the best I got today.
Okay.
Yeah, I really don't know how this episode's going to turn out. It's been a rocky road, this one.
Well, don't end the episode by saying that.
I think it's been fun, though. It's been a fun exploration. It was still a fun conversation, if not a bit broken up and distorted. But maybe the audience can let us know what you think. Did we just waste an hour of your life rambling on?
Don't end the episode like that. Oh my God.
Comment leave a comment below.
Please like and subscribe, and please comment. It really means the world to us when you comment.
I like these conversations where we just kind of trail off into these crazy directions, trying to figure out the universe. I think that's fun.
I do too.
Yeah. I hope you had fun too. Hopefully this is something we can release and everyone's having a great week and about to have a great weekend. It's my birthday this weekend.
Yeah, happy
probably
birthday.
the day this episode hopefully is coming out will be my birthday. So I hope everyone has a great weekend, and we'll see you next time. Good night.
Good night.